So, so that's where we're at right now and in rendering mode. If I come back to that last circle that Ethan was telling Riley about. Okay? And so then in the second button down on your tools in the middle, I'm a little mental these days. The camera gives us our rendering engine. And so as I move around mine, whoops, I'm not in share screen mode. All these fun things. Okay, so as I move around mine and it looks very pixelated, that's because of the render engine that I'm in. And so to change render engines, that's the little camera. Look, it's right below the screwdriver and the wrench, or the spanner as he calls it. The render engine by default is Eevee, which looks more like this. But he recommended we go to Cycles, because Cycles allows us to see the shading in the real world environment better. Okay? So hopefully that kind of helps. Some of the other things, and this is just kind of a review of some of the things that he's walked us through with our donut. We have talked about the end modifiers, which is where the wrench is. We have talked about subdivision. And so if you choose to add a modifier, if you click on that bar that says add modifier, and again, that was the wrench button that brings me here. So if I'm clicked on an object, like the donut, and I want to add a modifier, the only two modifiers we've dealt with so far is solidify and subdivision subsurface. Okay. Is that true? Are those the only two we've worked on? Do you guys remember anything else?
I believe those are the only ones we've used.
Yeah, okay. In materials, when we were in the materials mode and we were talking about the subsurface ratio and the color for lighting and how light bounces around within the object, we dealt with some of those other features there. But in here, for modifiers, it's just been the subdivision surface and the solidify an object. And so the subdivision surface is what allows us to look at the net or the mesh of an object and decide how much detail we want it to have. The higher the number, the more squares, the more resolution you have per object. So if I increased the viewport here for the subdivisions, I could increase it, but every time I increase it, it is taking the number of squares or the mesh that it has, and it is doubling that, doubling that, and doubling that. And so there's some things to consider in the 3D world. With the more detail you have, the larger your files get. Okay, same thing with Photoshop. When I take a photo in RAW, my images are huge. When I take a photo on normal or JPEG, my images are much smaller. My file sizes are smaller. And so that's what the subdivision does. It gives you more detail to work with. So if you want something to appear completely smooth and you want to control that, then more subdivision, you would want to increase that. But for a donut and for these sprinkles, we don't need that many subdivisions because they're going to be relatively small. If you were working on, gosh, I can't even think right now. If I were working on something that I needed very minute detail in, I would want more subdivision. Okay, but that's just the wireframing and how many squares do I have. That's what the subdivision come on. That's what the subdivision surface, I was trying to think what that second word was. Subdivision surface, that's what happens there. Solidify is what makes your object, for lack of a better word, fill in, changes the appearance. Anything that you do to an object, you are typically going to want that modifier above things like subdivision, because this is a technical aspect. This is an artistic aspect. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so this is the wire meshing underneath. This is what it's going to do above that. And so again, we would want them stacked that way. If you'll think about it, kind of if it's an artistic move, if it's an artistic look, a mode. Now this doesn't pertain to materials, but as we apply these modifiers, the more technical ones I put to the bottom, the more creative ones I put to the top. So you can think about it a little bit like that. The solidify was how we made our icing thicker. Okay, and so that thickness was down to 0.002 millimeters. I could make it 0.5, and you see how thick my icing just became. Okay, now I'm back down to 0.2, and it doesn't look like somebody just dropped the pot of icing on top of it. So, although it's rendering in that cycles mode right now. Okay, so does that help kind of remind you guys where we've been? I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ethan's like, yeah, I got this. Thomas, how's yours?
Mine looks good.
Okay. So your donuts were due Friday. I finally got mine done this morning. So please get your donuts uploaded to the look at these donuts or look at those donuts or however the assignment is labeled. I'm only looking for one donut. If you get one donut, I'm good. Today, we're going to be looking at how to make the sprinkles. And not Connor, Dylan's not on here. He submitted to the wrong assignment. Let me also go look in Canvas right quick. Did I post that? Yes. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
What do you see?
I see.
Animation.
You see the Canvas course?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the blender one is out here. Look at those donuts was the assignment that the single donut or the multiple donuts. Ethan got 3 of them done. I have fought with it so long. But also there is a primitive modeling exercise. Not everybody has turned that in. I've got about 3 of them. So if you've not completed that, that's a pretty simple, straightforward one, but it does require an explanation. Some of you have turned in the images, but not the explanation. So make sure you go back and look at that. I've made comments, so if that applies to you, go ahead and get that other part done so you can have full credit. And then the mesh modeling, which kind of goes along with what we're doing right here. And then there's modeling, shading, and textures, which I'm going to turn off this treasure chest for now. Oh, I can't because Jerry's already turned that in. Okay, so I'll leave that there, but don't worry about that one right now. So then there's a mesh modeling exercise that will be due by the end of this week, along with the sprinkles on the donut. Will be through with level 2 this week. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. So I'm going to go pull up my little guy here. And I fought with it this morning, and I never even got through this packet because I spent time working with a student the other day on Animate. And so didn't spend the time on this one that I should have. So today we're going to be looking at particles and how to make those sprinkles. And so if you've already gone through this, feel free to chime in and assist when some of us get stuck. What I would like is if all of you guys could kind of share your screen. I don't know if we can all do that.
You can only share it one at a time.
Okay, that's kind of what I was thinking. I'd like to be able to see your computer screen so I can see, you know, who's kind of there, who's struggling, who's whatever. That's kind of one of the drawbacks to this online world. But okay, so we're just going to go forth and conquer. Connor, did you have any other questions? Because you texted and said you were struggling. And I told you I've struggled all week, so.
No, I'm getting there.
You're getting there. Okay. Liz, you got your donut made and you were as frustrated as I was, but you got to that point. Have you worked on the sprinkles at all yet?
No.
Okay. Ethan, worked on the sprinkles at all yet?
Did he die?
I think he might have died.
Oh no.
Oh, sorry, I was talking and then I didn't realize I was still muted. I was saying I haven't worked on the sprinkles yet, but I was just making a new donut to do that with.
Okay. Jacob, how about you? Have you worked on the sprinkles?
No, I have not worked on the sprinkles just yet.
Okay, Riley?
No, I have not worked on the sprinkles yet.
Okay. So we're all in this boat together then. Nobody's ahead of the other. Where's Thomas? I thought Thomas chimed in.
Right here.
There you are. You just weren't on my screen listing there. How about you? Have you got the sprinkles done?
No.
Okay. And I will tell you guys, I mentioned it, I think on Thursday, they are putting progress reports together. I know Connor wasn't with us last week, but they are putting progress reports together and I will be making comments. So if you have not turned something in to this Intro to 3D course, it is showing up as a 0 in Canvas on their side. So I need either your mesh tool, your primitive object turned in. I need something that can be graded. So if any of you guys have not turned in something, you've got to get me something turned in because I've got to get a grade out there. Otherwise, it's going to go out as you doing nothing in this course, and that your principals and your counselors are not going to be happy with that. Okay. So I need something in there today because I've got to get it graded so that they can look at that and I can make comments and say, this is where we're at. So again, just trying to be transparent with you guys as to what's going on in the background and letting everybody know that there's got to be something in there for me to have a grade. Connor, I did go through with them last week and say, I know you've been working, but I'm assuming you're watching the videos and staying up with that. That is my assumption. So the videos, like today, I'm recording this, and so it's been posted out there on Canvas for the day. So I hope you can go out and check those if you've got any questions, because we've talked through some of those different scenarios, problems, whatever. But we are still having class. We are still taking grades. I told them last week, Connor, that, and Thomas, I can't remember if you were with us on Thursday or not, but some of you have been informed or are under the impression that at this point grades don't matter. For the tech center, they matter. The high schools are doing things a little differently, but we are between the high school and the college level. And as I shared last week, the college is still taking grades. I'm still taking classes. I'm still turning in assignments. And we're training you for the workplace. And I'm at work. You're in school. And so the grades are still continuing. Okay. So I don't want that to come as a surprise to anybody. And I don't want somebody being left behind the 8 ball going, what? I didn't know that was going to happen. So please, I just want to be clear that grades are still happening. And so we need to make sure we're getting things turned in a timely manner because I have to show progress, just like I have to show attendance. So keep checking in. I put the attendance at the bottom of the announcements for the day as to who was there so that I can kind of keep track. My boss looks at that so she can keep track. So anyways, that's just housekeeping. So just so everybody that is now in this meeting has heard the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and you guys can see the YouTube channel on my screen, I'm assuming.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm going to play the little Aussie guy here.
Learning the basics of Blender, but getting just a little bit more advanced as well. It's beginner, of course it's beginner, but you know, progressing past the basics of the basics. So let's start with some sprinkles, because that is something everybody is dying. You know, I've been reading the hashtags and the trends of the global Twitter, and everyone's just going wild for sprinkles. No, they're not. But let's pretend they are. So we're going to add some sprinkles to our donut. Now, right now we've got things in our outliner here. We mentioned the outline at the top right-hand corner. They're all just kind of like thrown in here. We've got the archive, you know, which we created before we did the sculpting and everything, but it's all just kind of thrown in. And if we're going to start adding extra stuff like sprinkles and all this kind of stuff, it's going to get a little bit complicated. So let's just organize it a little bit. So I'm going to select my donut and my icing here, and I'm going to hit M for Mary, or move. It's probably a better one, move. And I'll give it a new collection, donut. There we go. So this little checkbox, by the way, in case you're curious, it'll hide it from both the viewport and the render. So it's like disabling something almost, but keeping it within your scene. And then I guess I'll have one for my plane. We'll call it the environment. So I just selected the plane, M, new collection, environment. And then this stuff, I can just rename this collection. I'll just call it cam and light, or lights, camera, act, I don't know, right? So something like that. Okay, what was that? Something just flashed on the screen. Cool, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna hide the environment, I'm gonna hide the donut, and I'm gonna hide the scene, and we are gonna add in our very first singular sprinkle. So if you look at reference for...
Okay, so he basically just took all the check marks out of the objects out here in your object panel. So now we're back to an empty workspace.
Photos of sprinkles. Let me pull it up here. Ignore my tabs here. I've just been watching some Theo Vaughn. Love that guy. So these are the sprinkles. And you'll notice that, I mean, for one, there's no like uniform, you know, Confederate standard of sprinkles. It's just like all sorts. There's some that are shiny, some that are dull, but they all seem to have a very similar shape. It's just like mostly straight, but with like slight little like wiggleness to them. Some of them are shiny, some of them are dull. But anyway, that's the kind of overall shape. So you could start with a like a cylinder object to become your sprinkle, but they've got like a rounded edge. So instead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with a sphere. So we're going to go Shift A, Mesh, and we're going to go UV Sphere. Now by default, it's going to drop in this giant looking thing, and we'll set, yeah, first of all, the size of it. I'm going to go to like 1 millimeter, like really, really, really small. And then for the segments, the rings here, and the like basically the resolution of the sphere, that's quite important, because this is going to be basically duplicated all over the donut, like basically like 1,000 times. So any resolution you've got here is just multiplied by however many sprinkles you have. Point is if you have a high res sprinkle, one single sprinkle, for one, it's not even going to be visible in the render. Like it's so far away, it's not that detailed, but also it's just going to like drastically increase your render times. So I'm going to go with 12 segments and 6 rings. So,
okay, so everybody understands that that's what I was talking about earlier about your render and your subdivision surface. The more bases or squares you have, the higher the resolution, the bigger your file size. Okay, so that's exactly what he's talking about right there.
a very, very low res. And that's the radius, and there we go. If we bring in the donut, you can see how this looks in relation to it. In fact, I might as well move this over here like that. Just one little sprinkle, the start of a sprinkle. And I'm just going front. Oh, hang on, front. Yeah, I should have put it along the front axis. That's probably easier too. It's like when I'm working with a scene, I like to keep my camera looking down the front angle, and then I have everything positioned that way, so I don't get kind of lost in which side view or front view, whatever. Anyway, so I'm just putting this on the left-hand side just for whatever. Just keep it here, right? Okay, so with my sprinkle here, oh gosh, focus it, number pad period. Okay, so we want it to look elongated. And so the way we're going to do that is obviously edit mode with tab. And then,
Okay, so go into edit mode. Okay, and here's where I was getting frustrated earlier. Front. Okay, so and my screen's a little smaller. So make sure you're on the solid filled circle. We were talking about viewport shading earlier versus render mode with Riley there. So up at the top above your gimbal, you've got a solid surface. Okay, and I can't get in bigger to mine. So Ethan, you got some help for me here? How do I get to this look? Because mine is not. And I am in edit mode. View. And this is what happens. I end up getting turned upside down or something. There we go. So there I am. But I can't see in this environment.
He said something about a ritual or a gathering.
Okay, my scale was just.
Where is it? Mira, how do I get there?
If there is a Sabbath, there are many witches. They'll be too powerful. No, listen, Hansel. I found something here. In this cave. Something very powerful. Something that could help us.
It exists. Black magic. I can't believe this. Where did you find it?
Oh, come on.
It will allow us to penetrate their protection.
Oh, yeah?
The walls won't protect them. We just need something to place.
Okay. Where was it?
I don't want to change that.
Sorry, how do you get to like where you currently are? Because I just finished sculpting my donut.
Okay, we just added a new object. Shift A,
Okay.
mesh, UV cylinder.
So probably make it super tiny.
Yeah. And then I can't get back to. Move. I want it to move. I want scale. Can I not get to, okay. I was in edit mode versus object mode. Object mode gives me this. I'm getting too detailed. So edit mode gives me the framework. Object mode shows me the object where I can see. But Okay.
looking down the front angle, and then I have everything like positioned that way, so I don't get kind of like lost in which side view or front view, whatever. Anyway, so I'm just putting this on the left-hand side just for whatever. Just keep it here, right? Okay, so with my sprinkle here, oh gosh, focus it, number pad period. Okay, so we want it to look elongated. And so the way we're gonna do that is obviously edit mode with tab. And then while we're in edit mode, I'm going to grab the top half of my vertices here, and you'll notice that it won't select the other side. So make sure you're in X-ray mode when you do that. So select the whole top half. And then if we would like to move it, like it would just, yeah, it would be elongated, but it would also be like tapered. Like it basically, we want to like almost like create like a duplicate, like a middle part of it. So we're going to hit E to extrude, which you'll remember was the same hotkey that we used to make those like dripply bits of the icing. So it basically kind of like takes that and yeah, like moves it up, but then like adds a space between it. Anyway, you get the idea. Okay, so we got one.
Okay, well, so was everybody able to get their sprinkle and extrude it?
Oh, give me a second.
My computer's going a bit slow on me, so I ain't even got to that part just yet.
Okay. Okay, Liz, do you have a sprinkle made?
Well, I was going to wait until like I wasn't on the Zoom call because I figured it would be easier than like going back and forth and trying to pay attention to 20 things.
Okay. Riley, how about you?
It's pretty much the same as Liz. I don't have a sprinkle. I was gonna watch the videos after.
Okay, well then I'm just gonna keep playing. Thomas, are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like that. And what I can do, because I want to make like that end that is kind of like the reference, of course. It's I mean, see if we can actually find a reference for it. Yeah, it's like it's rounded, but it's not like as round as it is. It's not like a sphere end. It's just like it's a hard cut. Basically, I watched video actually on how they did it, but it's like they get like piping of like icing and they do like long lines on like a baking tray, and then they bake it, and then it just creates like baked icing. I believe that's what it is. It's just like baked icing. Maybe these shiny manufactured ones, they may be different, but yeah, you can make them yourself. Apparently they're really easy to do. Anyways, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this along the Z axis. So if I hit S and then Z, that's doing the effect that I want it to do. It's just sort of tapering it in a bit, like so. And then I'll do the same thing with the bottom one, S, Z. And there we go, look at that. One singular sprinkle by itself.
Okay, so as I grab the tip and I flatten it, and then I grab the bottom one and I flatten it up a little bit. There we go. I select. Okay, I have flattened the edges a little, the ends, not the edges, the ends a little bit. And then he's going to have us do shade smooth. Looks like coming up. Okay.
Z, that's doing the effect that I want it to do. It's just sort of tapering it in a bit, like so. And then I'll do the same thing with the bottom one, S, Z. And there we go, look at that. One singular sprinkle by itself. And while we're at it, we might as well go into shade smooth. And this is in object mode, of course. Make sure you're in object mode. Great. Now, with our donut here, we could, if we wanted to, we could, you know, grab it and like move it here and then duplicate it and then duplicate it, rotate it, and etc., etc. But I'm pretty sure the tutorial would be 10 hours long, and I would be receiving death threats from people saying, how dare you lull me into a tutorial and then hit me with duplication. So there's a better way to do things.
So I scaled
there
S
is,
and scaled it
for
down.
something like this, you want to use basically what's called particle instances, which is where it's referencing one object and it's duplicating it over the top of the surface of another object. So that we're going to do that. So I'm going to select my icing here, and there's the particle panel right here. And I'll move my little camera head out of the way so that we don't block this view.
That can be found right here under your wrench. It looks like a little tripod looking thing. Okay.
Object, and it's duplicating it over the top of the surface of another object. So that we're going to do that. So I'm going to select my icing here, and there's the particle panel right here. And I'll move my little camera head out of the way so that we don't block this view. Okay, so I just click. Oh yeah, by the way, I don't know why there's not a like new button, like the like materials there's a new button or whatever, but then like particles there's no button for like new. I'm sure it's a bug, but anyway, it's the plus top right button there. Click plus, and that'll add a new particle setting. And if you were to hit play, like spacebar, you would see that you get these like white dots appearing. So there are two types of particles. There are like emission types, which are like animated essentially, and then you've got hair, which are static. So now if I play, you can see nothing happens. So hair is the one we actually want, even though it doesn't look like it. For each one of these strands, we're going to reference that that single sprinkle there. So you can do that by going to underneath render, right there, render. It's rendering as a path or a strand, which is great for hair for a character. But in our case, we want to instead render as an object. And then the object that we're going to reference, this instant object, we're going to click this little eyedropper here. And the eyedropper allows you to just basically click any object in your scene. And there we go. Look at that. We have little single sprinkles over our donut. So the size of them is defined by this size right here. So this is really how you're going to decide. A bird outside my window. I'm not sure if you can hear that.
Your scale.
It's going to decide how, yeah, like really, there's no uniform sprinkle either. Like some are like really like thin and like almost like, yeah, like little hair particles, something like they're so thin. And then others just like thick and chunky. So really like
Okay, so let me recap a little bit. We're over halfway into this video, but we created the sprinkle by doing add mesh UV sphere, I think. And then we grabbed the top half, just like we did the donut to create the icing. And we held down the E key to extrude it. And that allowed it to become capsule-like, longer. Took that sphere and made it a capsule. And then selecting the top part of that and flattening it to make it kind of blunt on both ends. I'm not so caught up in that, but you guys can fix that to be the way you like it. Okay. And so then he went and he selected the icing and then went to this emitter. Okay. The emitter again is here, the little tripod right under the wrench. And to add a new particle, a new emitter. Sorry, that's a term that comes from old After Effects. After Effects has a lot of emitters. But anyways, our new particles, and there's nothing here, so you have to add using the plus sign. Okay, and plus it adds those bubbles. You have the option between emitter, which is the circles, or hair. We chose hair so that it would be random. Emitters typically emit from a source. That might be another way of thinking about it. So like when the bubbles started coming out, they were all coming out from one spot. Does that make sense? Kind of like a bubble machine. They all come out from the bubble machine from one spot. Whereas hair is more random. Okay. Then under hair, he chose object. Under the render item, render it as an object instead of as a path. Because initially it was a path. So change that to object. All right. And then poof, it did its thing. And then you could choose to change the size or the scale of your particles that are objects based off of a hair strand. Does that make sense to everybody? So far, that's what he's told us to do. So that's a quick recap. So we're going to continue.
Make the sprinkle that you feel best suits your needs. Okay, so that's the scale. And then there's another setting here, scale randomness, which I normally would use. Because by the way, this settings, like this particle settings and what I'm doing here, this is how you make like rocks across a landscape. You just like use this and go, and for this case, scale randomness is perfect because then you got rocks of different sizes. But it's also, it's not like shrinking them like just along one axis. It's also like it's scaling them. So sprinkles aren't, they're all like the same thickness essentially. So this setting actually doesn't work for us a little bit, but anyway. The main setting I know you're all thinking right now is like they're all facing the same direction. So that's not good. So we need to change the rotation. And for rotation, you need to use advanced settings. Check the box. I don't know. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, it shouldn't even just be an advanced setting because I've always used advanced settings because you always need rotation. So anyway, check advanced. And then under rotation, we're going to check that box. Click the little drop down. And orientation axes, we want to use normal. And it'll still be facing a direction, but it'll be a different direction. And you might think randomize is the one that we need right there. But randomize will, it'll rotate, but it'll rotate them on a different axis to the point that they're like standing up on top of each other, like facing upwards, which isn't right. What we want is this one, randomize phase. So when I do that, they're staying along like their same rotation, but it's like rotating along that axis, not the other axis. Anyways, there we go. Though having said that, I will use a little bit of random amount here because sprinkles, like they land on top of melted icing, right? And some of them will land like top on like that, and they'll like maintain a little bit of this rotation. So they won't be like crazy, it won't be like that, but they will have like a little bit of like tilt to them essentially. Great. So all well and good so far. One thing to note though is if we just hide the underlying donut, if we go underneath, you will see that we have sprinkles underneath our icing as well as on top. So this is, you know, in edit mode, you can see it's one solid object. And right now, Blender doesn't know that the sprinkles are supposed to go just on the top. So it's just placing them everywhere. So what we want to do is we want to define which parts are going to have the sprinkles, and we're going to do that in weight paint mode. So with our icing selected, object, weight paint mode. Or by the way, if you want a...
Okay, so go back up to your icing. Layer.
Underneath our icing as well as on top. So this is, you know, in edit mode, you can see it's one solid object. And right now, Blender doesn't know that the sprinkles are supposed to go just on the top. So it's just placing them everywhere. So what we want to do is we want to define which parts are going to have the sprinkles, and we're going to do that in weight paint mode. So with our icing selected, object, weight paint mode. Or by the way, if you want a hotkey, Control Tab will bring up at...
Okay, so when you're in icing, it sounds like he's saying white paint as in a color. It is weight as in how much does it weigh. Weight paint mode. So right here is where you'll find that. Okay.
A pie menu with all of those options up there. So that's kind of handy. So weight paint mode. And when you do this, it'll go blue. And essentially what you're looking at is, you know, like, what's the name of that movie with the aliens? Aliens vs. Predator? The one with the Predator. And it's like heat vision mode. That's what you're looking at. So blue means 0 weight. Now, if I just click anywhere on here, you'll see you get like heat paint map. Red means 1.
Okay, somebody help me because I can't get to the top down mode like he's looking at. So does that have to do with my camera? Help.
Isn't it the thing?
Do
Yeah,
what?
you-
The like colorful spheres in your top right hand corner. The one at the very top.
Yeah, and then click the Z.
No. Like not the others ones.
Okay, so where's it at?
No, click the Z and just like click it.
I did.
Oh, well then,
Might
I
need
guess
to-
your camera's centered on
There
something
it is.
different.
Shift C.
Oh, okay.
There you go. It's what you told me earlier, Ethan. All right, thank you. Because it aggravates me when I can't get there. I fight that more than anything. Gosh.
Aliens vs. Predator, the one with the Predator. And it's like heat vision mode. That's what you're looking at. So blue means 0 weight. Now, if I just click anywhere on here, you'll see you get like heat paint map. Red means 1, blue means 0, and then these values in between are obviously values in between. So the red values is where the sprinkles are going to appear. So if you try painting, it's going to be very slow. And that's because our particles are turned on. So if we just disable, click that little monitor thing there, it'll just disable it from the viewport. So now when we draw, it's going to be a lot faster. Okay, so the same hotkey, by the way, as sculpting, F will change the size of your brush. And again, if you want to bring up that tool setting thing here, which probably should be on by default, but for whatever reason it's not, these are like the weight and the strength of your brush. Like you could go like a low strength and just kind of paint. But anyway, default settings are fine, and I'm just going to paint like along the top here.
Okay,
Like
one of the other
so.
things, when mine came on, I had a ton of sprinkles. So he's sitting there painting, but I had so many sprinkles. My number here under the particle settings was 1,000. Okay, so I had all these sprinkles, and I'm sitting here watching him thinking, I don't need more sprinkles. Okay, so right down here on the emissions, you have a number. Mine, like I said, was at 1,000. I can change that to 500, and you can instantly see a better, more realistic looking number if I did 250. So then I may choose to come in and paint in another area that didn't have so many or whatever. But mine started with 1,000 particles on my donut. And so I was thinking, man, I don't need more. Looks like I can't see how many he has. So I don't see his emissions number down there. But under that emissions, and I don't even think he talked about it, I can change the number of sprinkles that I have on a donut by using the emissions feature. That also would apply to like the number of bubbles or whatever that was coming out of an object. So that's another way to look at what he's talking about here as well.
So, and I just want to make sure that there is, that's weird. Why aren't I allowed to paint right there? Oh, strength. Oh, I always confuse those two. Strength, full strength, but paint a weight of 1. There we go. Yeah, so I want to make sure that there are parts of it that, especially down here, the sprinkles would obviously fall off if it was like on an angle too extreme. So I just want to make sure it's just on the top. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to into too much detail for the beginning of the tutorial, but you know, I want the result to look good. And I've seen, you know, the past 3 years of people on Twitter adding me into their rendered result that they finished. And I had like all these notes. I'm like, you should fix this. This is too uniform. This is, and it's like, well, I should have put that in the tutorial, shouldn't I? If everybody's got the same problems, it means it's my fault from the tutorial. So anyway, I'm just trying to make it look nice. Anyway, that's fine, right? I'm just yabbering. So Control Tab, and then I'm going to go back to object mode. So bring back our sprinkles, and then the way that we tell the particle system to use that weight paint is by right down here underneath vertex groups. So you can choose a whole bunch of different properties that will be controlled by that, but the one we're looking for is density, and it's group. By the way, if you ever mess up your like your weight paint, or for whatever reason you can't find it, it's here, vertex groups. So whenever you start painting, it'll create a new vertex group, and it'll be right here. But if you ever mess up, you can just come to here and then click that little minus button. That'll delete that, and then you can click plus and you can add a new one. Yeah. Anyways, there you go. So we now have it on top of the icing where it should be. Hooray. We got too many sprinkles. We're going to get to that in the following parts. The sprinkle step, it's a little advanced.
I didn't need to add the groups, the last thing that he was talking about, because when you do, and you add density, you can see it groups it all in one spot. So that's not what I want. If I group the length, that doesn't help me any. If I clump them in a group, not helping me any. Okay, so I didn't really need to do the last step there that he was talking about. But under emissions, you can add or delete the number of sprinkles you have. Rotation, to use the randomized phase. And I ended up moving mine down to 0.75 instead of the 2.0. Again, emitter is the particles coming out versus the hair is the strands. And then under advanced, we had the rotation. So that if you can't see rotation under here, which you typically won't, okay, no rotations here, you have to click the advanced to get the rotations. And so that's what makes your sprinkles all lay in different directions. Is that clear as mud? Is everybody still with me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to stop with that. That is just part 1 of level 2. And we've been here for an hour and 10 minutes. So part 2, excuse me, as I stretch out this screen here. Part 2 is random materials. Part 3 is texture painting. So before class tomorrow, I'm going to struggle with continuing to work through this tutorial, but I'd like you to work part 1, 2, and 3 today. And when we meet back tomorrow at noon, if you've got questions about any of that. That's another 35 minutes of class for this afternoon, trying to make sure you've got the materials and the textures. And so I'm going to encourage you to work through that so that when we come to class tomorrow, we can see where everybody's donut's at, whether you got your particles on there and what they look like. Is that a plan?
Sounds good.
And so hopefully by Thursday, we can do parts 4 and 5 of this and be done with level 2. And next week we can work through level 3 and maybe be wrapping this little puppy up. Okay? So again, please, if you have questions, if you're struggling, I'm self-admitting I'm struggled with some of these different angles and things that are different from when I last worked in Blender. Please don't hesitate to come back on and say, hey guys, what have y'all solved? How have y'all fixed this? And we can work through it together. But I do need you guys turning something in for me to grade. If I don't have anything, I can't grade it. Or if it's turned into the wrong assignment, Dylan turned his donuts in to his mesh assignment versus the donut assignment. I can't put a grade out there. So check your comments. Make sure if you've turned something in that I've made a comment on it, that you go address that, because I can't grade it if it's in the wrong spot. Okay, and I can't think of anybody else that's done that, but it happens. So I will stop there. Anybody have any last minute questions?
No.
Okay. Here is my request. When we come to class on Thursday, I would love to have everybody there. I'm working on my national boards. I told you guys that earlier in the year. Thursday, I would like to be able to video class. And that's weird when we're in Zoom and it's being recorded, but for my national boards, I actually have to record me interacting with you. So on Thursday, when you come to class, I really need you to have your video monitors on. And whether you can have your screen on or not, like Liz and Riley were talking about a while ago, that's okay, but I need them to be able to see me interacting with you. So just having your mic on and your screen off will not be helpful for me. Okay? So if you can come Thursday planning to be able to be in view, and I need the class there because I have to address the whole class. 80% of the class, I think, is the number, which means everybody that's here, I need you there. So if you can do that for me on Thursday, I would greatly appreciate it. And I'm going to record that whole session with a video camera sitting up here watching me, watch y'all on the screen. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I can try to download Zoom onto the computer.
Okay, Riley, I can't hardly hear you.
I can try to download Zoom onto their computer and.
Okay. So how are
the computer has
you interacting now?
On my phone.
Okay. So yes, you can download Zoom to the computer you have. Okay.
Okay.
Need help with that? Let me know.
All right.
Okay. Jacob, I know you were having internet questions the other day about your hotspot. Did you get that taken care of? I know you're with us today.
I'm going to call my librarian today because I'm supposed to turn in my Wi-Fi connection today. And I want to see if I can get an extension so I can keep up with my schoolwork.
Okay.
If not, I'll have to call you and let you know what's going on.
Okay, please do. All right, well, I'm going to stop recording there.